to Saddleback in 1976, and I was looking around looking for another job. At the time, I was a nursing faculty at Rio Hondo College, but I wanted to move south and someplace that I felt was a little more stable than Rio Hondo was at that time. And so I came down here and I applied for a one-year temporary that was to fill in for Howard Adams, who was off for that year. And really intimidating because I had to interview with all of the nursing faculty, and I'm sure you figured out they can be intimidating. But anyway, I had a really great experience, and I got the job for a year. I decided to go ahead and take it, and I even had to pay for a sabbatical leave that I had taken at the other college and pay it off in order to move. So when I came here, I did that year as a temporary, and then of course the next year another position opened as a tenure track. So I applied for that and got it, and just loved it. Did nursing education, first assignment over at Mission Hospital, and did that until 1984.
Well, I came in the fall of 1969, and I had heard about the position from a friend of mine at a conference in Sacramento. And he said, they're building this new community college in South Orange County. And I was an assistant vice principal to high school in Redondo Beach. And so I came down and filled out the paperwork, and then I got an interview, and I'll never forget it because I drove from Redondo Beach down, and the freeway only went to Beach Boulevard. So I got off the freeway at Beach Boulevard and then had to take service roads all the way down to Mission Viejo. Had my interview and came out, and it was raining. It was in January, it was raining and it was dark, and I got lost going home. And I decided driving home that even if they offered me the job, I wouldn't take it. It was just too far out there. 1969. About 2 weeks later, my principal came to me and said, and he knew, of course, I was applying, and he said, I think you got a job. He said, I just talked to their president, and I think they're going to offer you a job. And sure enough, a couple days later, he did.
I graduated from the University of Arizona, and one of the first persons who interviewed me was Doyle McKinney, who at the time was in the first wave of hirees here at Saddleback, and after which our theater here is named. He was leaving Lowell High School in Whittier, I think it is, and he came to the University of Arizona because he had friends there and interviewed two of us. We both turned him down because neither of us wanted to go teach at Lowell High School, or high school, period. So I went on to teach at Northern Illinois University and then subsequently at Cal State Long Beach. After that, I had a little stint teaching a high school, which I absolutely hated. So when I had the opportunity to move up in this area, I thought of Doyle McKinney. I called him for an interview, and he hired me as a part-time instructor in speech and theater. I think it was 1974. And then I think it was in 1975, just a year later, which is what I think we came to call the third wave of hirees here at Saddleback, that I got hired along with many, many others.
I was started with Saddleback College in 1975, and I was very fortunate because it was my first job out of college with my master's degree, and I was delighted to get the job, and it was a fate of, I myself was a product of the California Community College, and my student activities advisor was one of the people that I did my internship with for my master's degree, who was knew of this opening at Saddleback College and recommended me for the position. So it was a great fun to have my very first job here, which explains how I got 28 years in and stayed so young, you see.
I was hired actually in 1978, but my relationship with the college goes 4 years prior to that, because I was a student here in '74 and was in the communication arts department. And Jim Lane was the primary instructor at that time, and he helped me a lot. In fact, he got me my first job with a recording studio with a former student of his. He used to teach at San Bernardino City College, and had a student there that actually opened a studio in Garden Grove, and so he got me a job, and I worked there for the 2 years I was at Saddleback up in Garden Grove. But I did a lot of other things at that time because the department was brand new. In fact, the library had just opened, might have been just a semester prior to that. So when we started in summer of '74, 1974, everything was brand new in the library. So, and then over the next year, they started the KSBR radio station, and I was hired as student help under Jim Lane during that time, and we got all the equipment together, and I wired up the studio stuff. And then Bill Weisgruber, who was also there at the time, made contact with an engineer up at KUSC. Hugh Paul was his name. And so I was with him, and when we actually put the antenna on the roof of the library and started up the station for the very first time. And actually those contacts worked well for me because that's what got me into USC, because that's where I transferred to, and I finished my education. So I left, I was here 2 years, 74 through 76. And then through those contacts, I was enrolled in USC and finished my degree up there. And then actually right before, well, in midterm there, I should say that I still had a lot of friends and kept contact with Saddleback. And so I remember the opening of the theater. I went to the very first show. I think it was Man of La Mancha. Monty Labonte was the dean at the time, and so I kept real close ties with what was going on at the college those couple years I was gone. But then what happened is a job opening, and again, through my contacts, I heard that there was a job opening in the music department for a recording engineer. See, it was called Senior Recording Engineer, I think was the title. And so I was very interested in that, and I was just about to finish up in Los Angeles, but I went ahead and applied anyway down here and got the job. And I interviewed with Monty Labonte, and in those days there were no committees or anything. I think you talked to him for half an hour. We sat in his office, and then we walked through the facility a little bit. And the next thing you know, I had that job as a full-time job.
I was first hired in 1977. I came from San Diego City College, where I was working part-time, and this was actually my first full-time job, dream job. And it's been wonderful for the last 36 years, which is how long I've been here. I love what I do. I love the people I work with. The campus is beautiful. The setting is pretty hard to beat. But I obviously came because it was the opportunity of a lifetime, and to teach the classes in a multitude of different venues. So I was hired to be the women's softball coach and come up with a plan for creating the softball field, which was a ravine. So Flip Dar and I had the task of meeting with architects and moving the dirt from the pool to go on the softball field. So that's what we did, and it took about 3 years. So I was in the middle of recruiting and developing the grass and the irrigation system, and then finally we fielded our first team in 1980. And that was the time when Title IX had just begun, basically in 1975, so that women could have an opportunity to compete in sports, because prior to that we only had at Saddleback men's sports. So, and it's interesting how they're numbered, because intercollegiate athletics 1 is football. That was our first sport with George Hartman. And 2 was basketball, and then it went on from there, baseball, track, cross country. So we started developing the men's programs first, and that was prior to me being hired. In '75, Nancy Bissett and Claire Elkins were hired to start the first 2 women's sports, which were volleyball and tennis. And then I was the third women's sport, which is women's softball, which is still going on today. I'm no longer coaching, but they still have that team. And there are 19 sports now, and I believe 10 are women and 9 are men.
Well, I came to Saddleback College when I was hired was 1976. I was hired actually a year after Kathy started. I was hired into a position called the Career Placement Center Specialist, which was, that time, a brand new position. I think it was set up on the instructional side of the house by Everett Brewer, and the other person was Lee Eckert, that was working with Ev at the time on that. So anyway, I was provided the opportunity to establish that program and get it set up. I then, about a year and a half later, I was asked if I was interested in applying for a position that was the financial aid director, because that person was retiring. And so I I decided to go ahead and do that. So I applied and was fortunate enough to be hired. It was an interesting interview process that I went through to get that position, but I felt really good about it at the end. Well, the process was just, I was asked if I was interested in applying. I, of course, then applied for the position, went through the interview process, which was the first time I'd been through a 3-interview process. So the first interviews, I think, were held with Bill Kelly. And then the second interview was with Jack Schwartzbaugh. And then the third interview was with Bob Lombardi. So, I mean, that was the first time in my life I'd ever been through that type of a process. But it was fascinating. I appreciated what I learned from it. I learned a lot about myself also from it.